I was looking for a new video game to buy for my older brother on his 16th birthday. I was searching on all the usual video game websites, EB Games, Best Buy. They had the latest games, but they were not so affordable. Craigslist seemed to be the only option. A few days into my search, I found an ad that had the video game I was searching for. When I looked, the post was up for about 30 minutes, so it was fairly recent. The online price for the new game was about 80 bucks. This ad was only asking for 25. I told the guy I was interested. We exchanged numbers, and I gave him a call to set up a time to meet. He introduced himself as Tony. Tony seemed normal on the phone, but his voice was very shaky. He reassured me the games were in good condition. He also asked if I would be paying through an e-transfer or cash. I told him I only had cash. That way, if I like what I saw, it's a fair trade on the spot. The conversation got a bit casual when he asked if I just bought a new console. I told him no, and that I was getting it as a gift for my brother's 16th birthday. I remember this is the part of our conversation when things took a turn. He then proceeded to ask how old I was. I didn't think anything of it, so I told him I was 15. I could hear the tone of his voice changing, as if he became more interested in what I had to say. He then asked for my address. I didn't say no at first. Instead, I asked him if he would prefer a meeting in public. He said it would be much easier if he just came over to my house. Before I could say anything, I was home alone for the next few hours while my parents were at work and my brother was at his friend's place. The truth is, I had used Craigslist once before, where I did an exchange outside of a coffee shop, but this would be the first time giving my address to a complete stranger. Looking back, I should have been wiser, but I knew my brother would like this as a gift. I told Tony if he were coming to my place, it would have to be quick. I didn't want to risk my family being home. He said he would. Reluctantly, I gave him my address. When I did, he told me the color of his vehicle and that he would be at my house within 45 minutes. Close to an hour goes by. As I'm sitting in the living room, I hear the sound of a car pulling up in front of my parents' house. When I peeped out the window, it was Tony's car. Instantly, I received a text saying he was outside. I got the money off the couch and went outside to meet him. As I got closer to the car, the windows were rolled down. There he was, sitting behind the wheel, staring at me. Nervously, I said hello. He responded by saying, "Sound very mature for my age." I told him thanks and showed him the money in my hands, asking for the video game. He let out a nervous laughter and said he accidentally left it at his house because he was rushing to get to my place. He said he lived close by and that I should go with him so we can go get it together. I had a really bad feeling about this, but I told him I couldn't leave because someone would be home soon. I asked if he would be able to come back, and he said no. He told me that I should lie to my parents and tell them I was going to visit a friend. I think that's when he saw my facial expression changed. I no longer felt comfortable buying from this guy and told him I think it's a bad idea. Anything could have happened next, but in that moment, in the corner of my eye, I could see my mom's car driving towards the house. I told him he had to leave. He saw my eyes looking towards my mom's car, and before he could say anything, he told me he would be back and drove off slowly, stopping only a few houses down from mine. After my mom turned into the driveway and parked her car, the first thing she asked, "Who were you talking to?" I felt terrible and scared doing this, but I lied. I told her I was hanging outside, and the guy was delivering something to someone's house in the area, but he may have been lost. She believed me and told me to help her bring the groceries inside the house. After I finished helping her, something told me to go back outside to see if the guy was still parked just up the street. Shockingly, he was. I stood there for about maybe 15 seconds and then finally he drove away. I didn't want to have any contact with him and blocked his number in my phone. My only fear is that he now knows where I live. Since then, I've been very careful and less naive when using Craigslist. In my second year of college, my best friend and I decided to rent an apartment together. We'd spent the first year living in our college dorms, but grew tired of our roommates and wanted to have a bit more freedom, so we decided to browse Craigslist. Initially, the plan was to get a 2-bedroom apartment, but then we discovered there were quite a few ads that were renting rooms. Some of the listings included working professionals only or international students. I continued scrolling and found a listing that seemed perfect. The occupant listed herself as a 30-year-old looking to rent 2 bedrooms in her 3-bedroom townhouse. The asking price was for $500 each room per month for females only. There were only 4 pictures included in the ad, including the washroom we would be sharing. I sent an email to the landlord wanting to tour the place in person and told my friend Jenna that we would have to check the place out. 2 hours later, I received an email with all the details about the property. The landlord said there were a few strict policies: no pets, no parties, first and last month's rent would have to be paid by cash. She even gave a suggested time to pass by later that night. Jenna had an evening class, so she wouldn't be able to join me. I told her it was fine and that I would go alone. We agreed to meet at around 7 o'clock that night. The place looked a lot different than the pictures I saw online. The exterior appeared to be a few shades darker. In the ad, there was a Mercedes parked in front of the house, but now there was an old pickup truck. There was no mini garden near the front door. Instead, the grass was almost high to the knee. The initial reaction should have been the very first red flag, but I thought the outside isn't all that important. Just check out the rooms and feel everything out, I thought. I proceeded to walk towards the front door when I noticed a young woman standing on her porch next door. She had this worried look on her face as she looked at me. I ignored her and proceeded to walk to the front door. Before I could even ring the doorbell, the front door opened immediately, which startled me. There was a strange looking woman standing there. She didn't look 30. In fact, she looked much older. She had unkempt hair, her shirt was wrinkled, and it looked like she was sleeping all day. Right away, she said she was looking at me from the window while I was standing outside. I let out an awkward laugh and told her the place looked a bit different. She said they'd been meaning to do renos over the next few months. I was curious when she said we, but then I looked across the living room and saw a man sitting on the couch. She said it was her husband. He waved at me, giving me a creepy smile. I was polite and said hello. The first thing he said was, "Where's your friend?" I told him she had class and couldn't make it, so it was just me. And then he said, "That's a shame." His wife said to come in. I started to feel a bit uncomfortable. There was a lamp light on in the living room, so it was very dim inside. There was a lot of old furniture, and once again, it looked nothing like it appeared online. I followed her as she started showing me around. All I kept thinking to myself was, I didn't like this place. When we entered the hallway, I realized her husband was walking right behind me, smiling. Ignoring everything she was saying at this point, I quickly asked where were the bedrooms. She said they were upstairs. The last place I wanted to go was upstairs. But since I asked, I hid my discomfort. It made the feeling much worse. While walking up the stairs, I could feel her husband still gazing at me. The rooms were small, but decent. However, I noticed the bedroom doorknob was broken. When I pointed it out, she said it's been broken for a while. When I asked, has anyone ever rented out the room, she said they had one tenant before, but didn't go into much details. She looked at her husband when she said, "We like to have full access around here." What her husband said next became the creepiest thing I've heard the entire evening. He said I was very pretty, and that when we moved in, he would be more than happy to have study nights with me and my best friend. That's when I knew this was not such a great idea, and I knew I had to leave. I was quick on my feet, pulled out my cell phone, and lied that my best friend is 2 blocks away from the house, and that I was going outside to meet her. I kept it cool and walked past the husband downstairs and out the front door. The lady I had just seen before going inside the house called out to me. She practically hurried over asking if I was okay. She sensed something was wrong, and I told her why I was here. The panicked woman said over the past few months, neighbors were concerned because they would hear loud screams on occasion. Because she lives right next door, she also noticed random young females moving things in and out of the house, and became very suspicious. When I told her me and my best friend were planning to potentially move in, she warned me to stay far away from them and to report the listing. The way that couple was looking at me, I knew they had bad intentions. Thankfully, I never looked back when I drove away. This story happened a few years ago when I was 18. I regret my actions, but back then, I was desperate for money to move out of my parents' house. I figured selling a few things on Craigslist was my only solution, or so I thought. My grandmother gave me a gold ring a few years prior before she passed away. I never wore it and always kept it inside a box in my bedroom closet. I decided to get the ring appraised. I didn't tell my parents I planned on selling the ring. Instead, I advertised it on Craigslist. There were a lot of responses, but there was one buyer in particular that stood out. This guy was very interested in buying the ring as a gift for his wife. Unlike the other responses, he didn't just reply with 2 or 3 sentences. He gave a very detailed description. He even surprised me by knowing the diamond cut, and was willing to pay cash for it if the value was true. I couldn't have asked for a better offer, especially when I needed the money. He did have one condition though. He said that he would want us to meet in person with the jeweler to have the ring appraised together. At first I was annoyed because I had done that already, but considering it was quite a large amount of money, he had every right to be sure it was worth his time, so I obliged. I asked him where would be a good location for us to meet. He asked where I lived, and at the time I didn't think much of it, but I told him my address. He replied that he actually lived much further away from me. I started to panic, thinking that maybe he would say it's too far and I'd have to keep searching. I didn't have a car back then, and I didn't want to lose out on this buyer. His next email should have been the first red flag. He offered to buy me a round-trip train ticket to his region. Once I got there, We would go to the jeweler in the local mall, and if everything was solid, he would give me the cash, and then I would return back to the city. I should have said no, but I didn't. He told me that his office is not too far from the station, even listed the name of the mall where we would meet, which is also not that far away from the station. This gave me some assurance that he really was legit. Before I knew it, I was on the train about to sell my grandmother's diamond ring. When I arrived at the train station, I sent him an email stating that I was there, told him the platform and what I was wearing. About 3 minutes later, he responded by saying his assistant will pick me up and bring me to the office. Moments later, a dark gray car pulled up to where I was standing on the platform. The passenger window came down. When I looked inside, there was the assistant asking for my name. He had on a dress shirt and a blazer, like a regular professional. He confirmed the buyer's name before I got in the backseat of the car. Before driving off, he looked down like he was typing something on his phone. He then looked back at me. It was this moment that I started to feel uneasy about this process. We slowly left the station and drove onto the main road. I had Google Maps on my phone to check between the distances of his office and the mall. Even though I didn't know the area, I did have a sense of which street names to look out for. About 10 minutes into the car ride, I started to wonder where we were going. It didn't appear like we were going to the mall. Instead, we approached a neighborhood that looked shady. I asked him to stop the car. He ignored me and continued driving. My heart started beating faster. Before I knew it, we pulled into the back of an abandoned warehouse. He turned off the car and said to me, "Where's the ring?" I was in complete shock. I didn't know how to respond. At that moment, I knew this was a scam. Nobody else was around the warehouse. He asked me a second time, "Where's the ring?" Again, I kept quiet. He then reached into his pocket and put on a pair of gloves. He saw the tears in my eyes as he watched me from the rearview mirror. If I attempted to run, I'm sure he was fast enough to catch me. If I didn't give him the ring, I knew something terrible could possibly happen to me. The worst scenarios were going through my mind. I handed him the ring, but then he asked me for my purse. I told him I didn't have any money. He then reached over and pulled the purse out of my hand. Before I could say anything else, he hit me across the face with his phone. He hit me so hard, it felt like I was about to black out. He then got out of the driver's seat, dragged me out of the car, before getting back inside, speeding away. All I could do was cry. I ran to a nearby house for help and called the police. I told them everything that happened. I was completely shaken. I wasn't able to make out the license plate number, but tried my best to give the description of the car and the driver. I had no choice but to contact my parents and explain to them what I had done. The police assured me that they would continue with their investigation. About 2 days later, they gave me and my parents an update. The police said my train ticket was bought online with a stolen credit card. The buyer's name was fake, and chances are it's more than a one-man operation. They said they're going to continue to warn people about the transactions that occur on Craigslist. Even though I'm embarrassed about what I did, my parents and the police said I'm lucky to be alive.